or the pseudo-military takeover in 2007, which is a serious problem. The law and order forces and administration are not independent. They act as per the desire of the government, in fact, as per the desire of the ruling party. As a result, the party in power can easily exploit police and administration against the opposition. And it has become a chronic problem. One more minute. Conclusion, what to do? First, I think and this part actually is not confined for Bangladesh. I think it's a South Asian thing. Maybe, I don't know, the Southeast Asians can take some message from it. First, I think getting rid of existing culture of revenge is very important. The party in power is always in horror of being extinct if they are, what would happen if they are defeated in the national elections. So what happened? This fear actually provokes undemocratic mindset, which in some cases turns into state violence against the opposition. So I don't know how to solve this problem. But I know for sure that civil society and international community need to avoid the trend of giving same weight to all. That's a problem with international media even. Then A, B, and C all are committing some sort of crime, so all are same. No, that's not possible. So they need to think about it. Party A, Party B, Party C, they have their own ideologies and they perform on the basis of their ideologies. So they have to mark on the basis of that kind of ideology, not only on the basis of the everyday performance. They must differentiate. Why I'm saying this? Because they must differentiate between the parties with democratic roots and liberal views and conservative, orthodox, and fundamentalist parties under the disguise of democracy. This is very much, the French philosopher de Tocquevillean question. The undemocratic force elected democratically. What you can say then? That's a very serious problem in India, in Bangladesh, in many other parts. Redefining the term democracy is important because these days democracy is mere electoralism, which cannot prevent the government and state from being violent and illiberal. Winning the elections at any cost in Bangladesh has become the only target. As a result, there is no or minimum emphasis on regulative ideals of institution building. So there is no, government doesn't care simply. They only need votes. Finally, much attention needs to be given on the core of liberalism. Two things. Individuals' autonomy, that's very much connected with human rights defense and everything. And of course, rule of law. And let's not forget in the West, in the successful democracies, until the end of Second World War, democracy and liberalism didn't come together. In 1840, only 2% of the total population had voting rights in England. But by 1840, by that time, England civil society or whatever, at that time civil society was not a popular term, but by that time, the Western societies already win over very basics of the individual rights. That means what I'm saying, in order to defend human rights, in order to defend democracy, we need to think about actually the liberal, constitutional liberal ideals, not only vote. As he mentioned, one party win over the election and then another party replaced, but it actually takes no change. So I am in favor of putting much attention on the liberal ideals, constitutional liberalism that allows space for individual and of course the rule of law. So let me stop here now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think the issues that you mentioned, that the tension between democracy and liberalism is very important. And in the case of Bangladesh, it's very interesting that you mentioned that some section of the civil society and the middle class, in the name of protecting the elected government, but allow the government to abuse power and commit a human rights abuse. And so I think the important thing that sometimes we forget is in order to achieve truth and justice, the liberal values need to be taken root in the society also. We will move to the last case, the least promising and the saddest story of all, my dear country, Thailand. Dr. Benjarat will talk about the case of Thailand, the case that the culture of impunity has been so prevalent. Okay, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, you all again. On another hat as a speaker now. I'm going to talk about Thailand, but I would like to start with Professor Anjin's slide. This is what I think most of the Thai participants in this room, we want to see this to happen with the perpetrators in the case of violence against people in Thailand. We haven't experienced any trial or conviction that bring justice to this case of violence. And I'm going to talk about Of course, there are many state violence, many violation of human rights caused by the state actor in this country. But I'm going to focus only on the 4 cases of violence and the violent suppression of the democracy movement in Thailand. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Thai political history, I'm going to talk about these 4 events. 14 October 1973, 6 October 1976, in May 1992, and April and May 2010. These are the key major events where the people came to the street, and actually I will use your term, it's an uprising, people uprising against military government, and they were faced with violent suppression and violent crackdown. Many people die or disappear or injured from these 4 events. So far, no one has been brought to justice. The military is still in power, and nothing happened in these cases, and as I will show you. 14 October 1973. When I talk about these 4 cases, I will not go chronologically. I will group the 2 events together. 14 October 1973, and I will discuss it together with what happened in May 1992, because these are the 2 events 2 incidents where it is kind of got official recognition as democracy movement. Some kind of recognition. But for October 1976 and April and May 2010, they were mostly labeled by the government version and even among many Thai public as not so democracy movement. And so I try to show that even with different recognition, impunity are still what happened in 4 cases. In 14 October 1973, a group of students demonstrated against the military government, and they faced a crackdown led by the soldier and the police. Several deaths, and they were held as the major turning point of Thai democracy history. What interesting is that the government issued some investigation into the case, and the government admit that there was some wrongdoing happened, but no one was charged guilty of committing those crimes. The government issued a statement saying that there was some wrongdoing, some illegal act done with some anger on the military side that aimed to destroy the people. But then the government say it was done by wrong decision of the military leaders because they received wrong information about the protester. And that's it. And then later, the government issued an amnesty act for the student, and they call the Amnesty Act for the student and people committed crime related to the protest march on the 13th and 14th of October 1973. In this Amnesty Act, I think it's very interesting because it describes the violence on that day as it was caused by misunderstanding between the students, people, and government officials. So the violence happened on that day were seen by the authority as some kind of misunderstanding. And they say the officers, the security forces operating on the day just follow their supervisor's order. So such an act is protected by law. Interesting. 70 deaths, 857 people got injured from this kind of misunderstanding between the student and government officials. And this is the official number of death and injuries. Not to mention that, of course, we always have different numbers of between the people's information and the government numbers. And then in May 1992, another mass protest against the military. Again, the government admit that there was something wrong on that day, but no one was charged. They set up a committee to investigate the truth on crimes and casualties related to the demonstration in May 1992, and it admits that there was an excessive use of force from the security forces, but it blames it on the police for not able to control the riots. Yeah, it's a politics of name, how you name what happened on the day. And therefore, the military had to intervene. In other words, because it's the police fault, the military had to do what they are supposed to do, and it doesn't mention any of state accountability. And I have to mention that for this event, the Ministry of Defense also set up its own commission to find out what happened. But I think about 10 years after May 1992 event, they come up with a report that is mostly blacked out because all the information was censored, so it's not useless. It's useless. Later, only few days after the event, the military government issued an amnesty act for the wrongdoer related to the demonstration. What it says is that the Amnesty Act was later revoked on technicality ground. It doesn't go through the proper process of issuing a law. Anyway, the amnesty granted by this act is not affected by the revocation of the Amnesty Act. The amnesty was given to anyone related to the violence against the people. It was later revoked, but the amnesty is still intact. So, you get it? 44 deaths, 48 people still missing, even after, more than 20 years. Almost 500 people got injured, and more than 700 people disabled, and no one was charged. The two events that I mentioned to you, the 14 October 1973 and the May 1992 event are, as I mentioned, they are kind of officially recognized as democracy movement. We have seen the government finally agree to build the 14 October Memorial site in Khop intersection. And as we will hear in the afternoon about the attempt to build the memorial site for the May 1992 event. But the other two events I'm going to talk about are even more, the situation is even worse. This is what happened on the early morning of the 6th of October 1976. I think for the Thai people, you may be familiar with this very sad photo where right-wing civilian joins hand with the armed force in attacking the student and people demonstrating against the military government inside Thammasat University in this campus. For this case, the government attempt to look into the case mostly provide justification to the use of violence and therefore impunity. There was an amnesty law issued in the case of 6th of October 1976. It gave amnesty to any act relating to the coup, because on that day after the violence happened, the military staged a coup. So that as they're similar to the experience in Nepal, whenever there is a coup, they issue an amnesty for themselves. But that amnesty also include, actually I didn't put it here, but it include activity before the coup also. So what happened that morning before the coup was also get amnesty. And it says this act got amnesty because they aim to ensure stability of the kingdom to the Iran, to the monarchy, and to provide peace for the people. And therefore, it's okay to kill the people. It doesn't say so, but that's how I interpret it. It also gives amnesty to any person committing crimes. It's supposed to be not good because it's supposed to give amnesty to the students who were demonstrating on the day. But in effect, it gives amnesty to the civilians who commit violence against the student. You remember? These people, they are not security force. They are civilians, but they are mobilized by the state. And they got amnesty. And for the students who protested the government at the time, they were portrayed as doing so. They came in Thammasat University protesting against the government because they lack understanding of the actual situation, because they are still young and they lack of experience. And those who were granted amnesty for this group, the students who were the victim of the violence, they could not ask for any remedy or reparation according to the amnesty law. Just outside this, another 100 meters away from this building, not many deaths, 46 people dead, but very, very bad violence, and 167 of them injured. No one were brought to justice. In April and May 2010, you cannot see this in English. It says live bullets firing zone. You may have heard about the demonstration of the red shirt protester against the government of the time, and the government declare some area that they're going to use real bullet in suppressing the violence, the protester. Again, for this case, the government set up an independent committee to investigate and to find truth for national reconciliation. What's interesting here is fact-finding and truth is for reconciliation, not for the sake of truth. Later, the Anti-Corruption Committee, and you may wonder why we have to do with Anti-Corruption Committee, because it deals with everything the politicians do. So the Anti-Corruption Committee has a resolution because there's a request to remove the commanding officers of the crackdown from office. The Anti-Corruption Committee says because the demonstration was not peaceful, so the state had to crack down. And the commanding officer, those in power, did nothing wrong. It was only the fault of the officers on the street that they fined. So those who gave an order did nothing wrong. 92 dead. Almost 1,400 people got injured, 4 disabled. This is what happened in Thailand in the past almost 40 years. And then that's why we have the culture of impunity. Why? because the perpetrators remain in power. We may have some period of civilian government, but as you see in the past, actually 10 years that the military got back and intervened in the politics again. And another key thing that I think it helped to sustain this culture of impunity is that the suppression or the violence crackdown of the demonstrator are always done in the name of peace and reconciliation and justify on the ground of national order and peace, and because those demonstrators are a threat to the nation and to the monarchy, and it justify the use of force against them. And another issue that I think is also very important is about the culture of human rights. I think the other speaker also mentioned that. It was very impressive to hear from Korea cases where people join hands, civil society protest against the government in order to bring justice to those victims. But we are experiencing the same thing as in Nepal and in Bangladesh, that the urban middle class doesn't care what happened to those people, how many deaths we have in the past 40 years. And I think that's it. Not an experience to learn from, but I think we learn a lot from other cases. But just again, I just want to repeat that I just focus my presentation on the 4 cases of them the violence against democracy movement. There are many other human rights violations, especially in the last 2 years after the military came to power. And I hope one day we would be able to bring some justice to the victim and bring those perpetrators to trial. And of course, we want peace, we want reconciliation, but we do not want that on the cost of human rights and justice. Thank you.
Thank you. The last point about the culture of human rights is very important because we lack of the culture of human rights, even among the civil society and middle classes, as you mentioned. So if I conclude just very brief, if South Korea represent a case of even you said restricted, limited, but you achieve truth and justice that lack in other 3 cases. But Thailand may be the worst because even the truth, we never achieve the truth, and especially from the government side. All the investigation and attempt in fact-finding come from the civil society groups. That will be another session in the afternoon talking about these issues. So I think now it's time for Q&A. I believe there's a lot of questions. So I will take some more for the first round. Anyone, please? Okay. And anybody else? Okay. Now I got 3. For those who want to ask questions, please identify yourself. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. I'm Joel Barredo. I am a Filipino, but I'm based here at Mahidol University. And it's really an eye-opening experience on a Sunday that we hear your experiences, and sort of frustrating in a way, because I think at this point a lot of people in the countries mentioned and even in many other countries are still fighting for and still yearning for true freedom and democracy. 2 years ago, I wouldn't even, think or believe that I would be talking about my country, the Philippines, and the dwindling of human rights and democracy today. Also, ironically, this year is the 30th year of the EDSA revolution, the People Power Revolution. And it's not that, it's only like 3 decades ago where people, young people, civil society had marched together to fight for democracy. And look at us now. it is really saddening, and the Philippines is in the spotlight in terms of the revival of what they're saying. And we just heard this 2 days ago, that there's a revival of a constitutional authoritarianism. We've also heard about, I don't know, everyone knows about the rise of extrajudicial killings. And I think what is most disturbing is, I think, the revival of and the rise of historical revisionism. And this is very much related to my question, because right now, as you all know, that anytime soon, the Philippine government is supporting the burial of the dictator Ferdinand Marcos. And this is a reflection of how society and how state commemorates or remembers the atrocities done during the martial law. And this is because of historical revisionism being done by people in power right now. And you can see that people are, and this is also a reflection of why the son of Ferdinand Marcos was voted by around 14 million people. And these are mainly young people and those who have lived through martial law. And the story goes on. It's very frustrating, and we're very, very depressed. Though there's still the civil society movements it's still, I think, one of the most vibrant movements in Asia, in the region. But then I think with too much of things, the dwindling of human rights and freedoms, and the questioning of the value of democracy in the Philippines, it's very confusing. And I just want to ask you about maybe your reaction of what's happening in the Philippines and this emergence of historical revisionism against the memory of violence, of the violation of human rights in the Philippines. And we all know that the Philippines at some point became the benchmark of democracy, but I think now we are on the scale at the level of Syria. And what's the UN is saying, that we are now being categorized with Syria in terms of human rights and democracy. I just want to know what your thoughts are, being there at the forefront of your democratic movements. And what can we do, you think? What are the ways forward from this? Thank you so much.
Thank you. For the second question, please.
สวัสดีค่ะ ปรานอมสมบง I work with a lot of the human rights defender in Thailand who defending human rights for democratization rights in Thailand. It's quite interesting. I think we should have more talk under this quite restrictive situation of the state violence and impunity. So I have a few points here before I ask the speaker and maybe the friends in this room as well. Not many people talk about politics of the impunity, but I think everyone talking about who's a ruling elite, who made up of the past violence, who the perpetrator, but also who doing now and who they are and how we held them accountable. Because in some of the elite class, it's quite difficult to hold them accountable. And I think that's the main issue. Also, the fight against impunity is linked to the space of the justice, whether in local or international level, and the level of sanctions, either in the punishment form. I think we talk about how the legal procedure go to sanction form, but also probably would be nice to look at the symbolic form, because how the whole society who gone through the violence reacted in the form of holding the perpetrator accountable. And I think that we talk about, and now we see a lot of Thailand people trying, people try to organize a samana like this, organize an activity, organize a theater to react to it. For me, it's quite important to look at both punishment form of the judicial process, because I mean how much we can go through with military tribunal when the perpetrator done by military in that time. It limited. It can't go more than that. That's one point. Also, definitely we can't restrict ourselves of understanding of the legal impunity architecture. But I think my question of this morning is also, I think some of us touch on impunity is shaped by the situation of denial and deeply like rooted within the social body and involve the culture of silence. Lots of us talk about culture of silence, but also I think we see more people in power, either the media which control on ideological framing. So my question to the speaker is, and this should lead to the a bit more inspiring, yeah, because we do have to move forward somehow. But my question to you is, in your country or like in Thailand, when did you see when the fight against impunity created the changes of action? For you, is when is the most momentum in like Bangladesh or Nepal, Korea? Because like sometimes we can do something a bit different, like the people tribunal. When you get the unofficial agenda to looking at the people, raising to that tribunal to help someone accountable without the state mandate of the legal and their mandate of the control by the elite. So those kind of example I'm looking for. Thank you, and sorry for a bit long.
Now move to the last question.
My name is Supanat Ingel, and thanks for the chance to ask. The problem about the democracy movement is they have a very low power to deal with the elite, and the most key is the democracy movement are alone. They can make the other movement to understand them that what they do, and so democracy movement is weak. So the elite deal with the democracy movement with the violence, not the compromise, because they not have enough power to deal with the elite. So I want to ask you that how to make the democracy movement have more power to deal and stronger than now, and make the other movement to understand the democracy movement. Thank you.
All interesting and important questions. So all speakers feel free to address and try to answer each question. Anyone want to go first? Okay.
I think there was rather, I see it, it is the complement to our presentations rather than this is a question. The Philippines, experience, I think it's like I was in Philippines in 1986. I went there to celebrate the people power. That time we were struggling, we were fighting against autocratic regime in Nepal, and I was invited by Bayan. That time there was an organization. We learned many things from Philippines, but the problem now is that when people are very much frustrated and they want change, and if the parties are weak, the politics is weak, I would say, the youth are not taking part in the politics, then what happened? The consequence is that they look towards a strong man. Look at what happened in US. Even now, the rise of Trump. This is the outcome of the frustration. If the state failed to address the aspiration of the people, if the state failed, to satisfy the youth, their desire for change, then you look for a strong man, the Spider-Man. Yeah, that's how things are happening. So once you have this is like a situation. Your Human Rights Commission was very strong. When I was commissioner, I went to Philippines, Manila, to learn from them, especially holding accountable to the military generals. They were saying, and they had developed some system to get promotion from some grade. You need no objection from the Human Rights Commission. But all this has gone. Where? Why? Because the lack of politics among the youth. I think that's why depoliticization, this morning we were talking, me and Santanu, depoliticization is the problem. Where in Philippines you see lot of human rights organization, lot of NGOs very active, which we call vibrant, but these are not vibrant. I tell you, if you don't take up the issue of politics, then how come you are vibrant? Only talking about the issue, and you don't have ideology to change that. Okay, we can talk about women's right, we can talk about disability, we can talk about everything, right to food. But how you resolve this problem of right to food? Unless you don't talk about the distribution of the wealth. Unless you talk about the land reform, land to the peasant, then that's how I think problem is there. So we need to see beyond. Unless we don't have youth taking part in the political movement, I think nothing is going to change. And the politics, but democracy. The politics means the democracy. I think this is what I can just react to your query. And like politics of impunity, yes, impunity is very much deep rooted. In my context, what happened that again where we fail, and it is a trap. We are in trap. If something happen in the country, violence, human rights violation, violent conflict, then what you do? You want peace. And how peace? That means, again, I'm again referring, peace through negotiation and win-win situation. We are taught from the Westerns, we must have to have win-win situation. And what does it mean? How we define win? Win-win means win-win to the perpetrators or win-win to the people. Unless we don't talk about the people, how we create a conducive atmosphere where the people will be winning, not the perpetrators. And this is the problem. And when politics of appeasement takes place, then due process gone. Everything will decide in the street. Nobody will go to the court. So that is exactly the situation which exaggerate this impunity. So I think that's why again my answer is only is that the youth must take the politics. They must talk politics. I am not saying that they must be following some political parties. No. Politics means democratic politics. I think how we strengthen this democratic institution. We never talk about National Human Rights Commission. We never talk about the law. The Supreme Court or the courts. We never examine how the court judges are being picked up, nominated or appointed. We never talk that. Only we talk about the freedom of judiciary. What do you mean by freedom of judiciary? Judiciary is free, of course free, but who are there to enjoy that freedom? I think this is all the process where we must be very, very vigilant. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful question. I don't know what to say. Everybody are looking at the Korean case is good, but I don't agree with that. I think the key problem is how to control, how the civil society can control the military. You know, the modern state, only state can have the violence. That's the key point. So that in Korea, after transitioning to the civilian government, through the we called June struggle in 1987, that was second important historic event. The first one is May Uprising in 1980, and then that June struggle happened against the rule of the new militarist dictatorship, and I think that's the key point, how we control the military. And some Korean political scientists are convincing that Korea cannot return to the dictatorship. They are really convinced, but I don't agree with them. Unless we cannot control the military, there's a possibility we can go back to the horrible previous situation. So the other one is how to establish the independence of the judiciary. I didn't have enough time to explain the detail, but as I mentioned in my presentation, during the Park Chung-hee's dictatorship, that horrible state violence happened in the People's Revolution Party case. We call that case judicial killing. That's not extrajudicial killing. They follow the judicial procedures. The justice, the Supreme Court, they agreed to kill them. They just accepted the decision at the district court. So, all the judges and prosecutors had been served as we called handmaiden of the dictator, handmaiden of the power. And after transitioning to the civilian government, the most progressive administration, the President Roh Moo-hyun, and during his era, the Chief Justice, Supreme Court, and President gave the official address. They gave the people the official apology for the previous judicial killing. And the prosecutor's office and the judges, they did the same thing during the dictatorship. They supported the wrong decision. And I think the second thing is how to establish the independence of the judiciary. That's a big question. It applies to the Philippine society and in any other Asian countries to prevent our constitutional fundamental rights. That's my response.
Okay. I'll have kind of overall observation regarding the three remarks or questions, whatever. But first, let me make one thing clear regarding your question on the Philippines. I think it's not a problem at all whether because of his son of Marcos he cannot get votes. Because if he comes through proper channel, do democratic politics, it's all right. But I emphasize on the other side of the story. Let me mention you one article. In 1997, in Foreign Affairs Journal, Farid Zakaria, he's an American intellectual, he published an article. And the title of the article was really interesting, Illiberal Democracy. He was saying, what is illiberal democracy? He was saying democratically elected but behave in a completely undemocratic way. And the number of illiberal democracies, I am telling you, now is on the rise worldwide. Think about a country like Russia. Russia and Putin is actually synonymous. You can say there was a meeting between Russia and America, and even you can say there was a meeting between America and Putin. But Putin is democratically elected. Think about Iran. Democratically elected regime, but highly illiberal. So that's the problem. So I think before condemning the dictators or whatever it is, Marcos and everything, we need to think about the illiberal democracy and think about the current regime, the democratically elected regime in Philippines. That's, I think, need to be taken care of. Regarding Thai question, and actually the third one is most interesting. It's something like a very simple question, what to do, but it's actually really a big question. I myself think these days this is a basic problem in our part of the world. That means in South Asia. I presented a paper last month on South Asian democracy, and what I mentioned, that there is no guarantee that I need to be Democrat to get votes. But I can get the branding of Democrat after I win the election. Let me give you two examples. One is Narendra Modi. There was a communal violence against the Muslim community in 2002 in Gujarat province. At that time, Narendra Modi was the chief minister. And what happened later on? The Gujarat people didn't punish him. Actually, they re-elected him twice. And in 2014, Narendra Modi became the prime minister of the world's largest democracy. The highly controversial person, and his involvement in that communal rights actually went unpunished. Second example is Mahendra Rajapaksa in Sri Lanka. The way he actually ended the uprising of the Tamil movements, it was a completely illegal military action, and he was condemned internationally vehemently. But only in less than 6 months' time, he was re-elected by the Sri Lankan people. So what does it mean? And what can we say? Now, if in a country, imaginary country, say a country name is X, and they are under military rule, so this is straightway black and white. But in case of the democratic regimes, it's really gray. It's not that much straightforward. So you have to decide, in response to your question, you have to decide who you think are Democrat. Is it only that they are getting votes, that's why Democrat? I think no. It's really high time for the human rights defenders to think about it seriously. Other than democracy and majoritarianism, that means head counting has become synonymous. But we need to differentiate between it, because end of the day, democracy is a qualitative thing. It's not only quantitative. So that's my response. And one small thing is, let's not think politics without involving with the economy. So we are in the neoliberal era. And a neoliberal era has some special characteristics. And no country, be it is Bangladesh or Thailand or Korea, is not immune from the problems of neoliberalism. So I would say, when we think about democracy these days, we need to think about this global phenomena, which is neoliberalism. Thank you.
Thank you.
A quick response to Joel's question on what can we do in the Philippine cases. I wish I know, because that's what we are experiencing here in Thailand in the past decade. Okay. In response to B's comments and question, I agree with you. And when I was preparing for the presentation, I also realized that we pay not enough attention to the people's effort in establishing the fact and to break out the culture of impunity, and I agree with that. But what can we do? And I cannot give an example, of course, I never experienced one in this country. But I think what can we do is we have to keep engaging in this politics of naming, politics of interpreting what is democracy and what is the society that we want to live in. And the truth about democracy movement, the truth about the violence that happen in the society is always contested, and there are different narratives, and we have to keep speaking about it. We have to keep talking about it and keep documenting it. Like when Sushil shared the story about Nepali case, without proper documentation, it's useless. What we are trying to do is useless. So, yeah, we have to keep doing what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's to end this session. And I think one thing that we can say is to fight for democracy, truth, and justice is unfinished struggle, even in the case of Korea, as you mentioned. I think all speakers address many important issues, share with us important lesson from their own country, and perhaps to get rid of or eliminate the culture of impunity, we have to do so many things at the institutional level, the reform the military security sector, strengthen the democratic institution, how to establish independent judiciary, and also at the cultural level, I think how to establish a strong liberal culture in our society and the culture of human rights, as Dr. Benjarat mentioned. I want to ask all of you to give a round of applause, big applause to all the speakers. And for the lunch break, we provide free food for all. So
Actually, we prepare for only 50, but then we bought more food, and I hope it's enough for all.
For all. Okay. So who said no free lunch? So lunch for all, and
actually we try to show the video of the May 18 struggle. It is about 45 minutes long, and I'm not sure because I guess you may be hungry already. I don't know what to do.